Shabbat Shalom. Earlier this week, I got a phone call from a reporter from the JTA, and they left a message saying, Rabbi, please call me back. I want your comment on a very important issue. Okay? I'm calling back the reporter, thinking, what is this person going to ask my opinion about? There's a lot going on in the world right now. Israel and Gaza are back to open violence with hostages hanging in the balance. Our government is claiming anti-Semitism is the reason for pulling millions of dollars in cancer research. There is due process in this country on the ropes. Which is something that never goes well for the Jewish people. There is a lot, good and bad, happening in and around our community. And so there are many things that this reporter could have wanted my rabbinic take on. And of course, when I called them back, they said, Rabbi, I want to ask you about bagels. Yes. Specifically, the New York Bagel Shop, a local shop here that has been, according to my understanding, serving bagels to this community for over 27 years. And I'm going to give some rough sketches of what is going on here. I'm happy to talk about it in depth and detail after this at Kiddush. For more, of course, and I'm going to do this as carefully as I can because as in everything in our world, even the facts are somewhat up in the air. But essentially, the owner of the bagel shop, who has owned it for many, many years, is of Palestinian descent, and somewhere around November, there was found that he had a second Facebook page, not his New York Bagel Facebook page, but a second one in which he was posting things about the war in Gaza. Again, it is unclear. He has claimed some of the posts were not his, some of the posts were, but they were posts that someone of Palestinian descent might post. They were posts that were angry. Again, I don't want to, some of them might have been anti-Semitic. Some of them definitely were anti-Semitic. Those ones were ones that were maybe claimed to be his, not his. This is where we can talk about it later and we can read more about it. But when all of this happened in November, a number of rabbis in the community went and met with Nick. The person who gives him his kosher hashgacha met with him, the board met with him, law enforcement was involved, and it was determined that he's not a threat, that his kashrut still stands, and that it was sort of, he stood what it was. And since then, he has sold the business to someone else, and also posted multiple posts on Facebook apologizing for hurt caused, reiterating his love and commitment to the Jewish people. And that's where things had been for months, until a couple of weeks ago when a new petition was started again to try to get his kashrut certification revoked, and that's where we're at right now. That's been going on, and that hit the news and Facebook, and so it's become something that people are talking a lot about. Now, what I want to say about it for us and here, I'm going to speak my opinion, and I'm happy to discuss this further and more, and then we're going to move on to, Torah. But many of us in the community, myself, other local rabbis, leaders in this community, we met about it, we've spoken about it, we've spoken with Nick, and the decision that we made was that we do not want to boycott these bagels right now. They're still allowed in our synagogue, and I know that other synagogues and other institutions have made different choices, and I promise you, I really am not passing judgment on that, but what it came down to for me, and I'm speaking in my opinion right now, is it seems like this is a person who is trying to do the right thing. They posted something that maybe they shouldn't have. They apologized for it. They made amends in the business. It is no longer owned by that person. And I don't want to live in a world where we're all boycotting each other all the time. I don't want to live in a world where at this point it seems like the boycott is not about actions, the boycott is about opinions held by the owner of a store or the former owner of a store. And I don't want to be in a place where we have to vet the opinions of every single person and we're all fighting with each other all of the time. I will say, I'm open to changing my mind on that. And I look forward to speaking to you all kiddish about it in a little bit. And I'm happy to hear other opinions, but that's where we're at. And I want to say that part of what is going on here for me, I'm trying to speak, again, very personally, and I'm not trying to pass judgment on those who believe differently than I, is that it feels like the world is sliding into a dark place. A dark place of sort of raw power, of lack of commitment to one another, of a lot of different things that are happening. And I will be the first to say that I have no idea what's actually happening. I don't know which side is right. I don't know a lot about what's happening here or in the world, but I am fairly certain that the way out of this dark slide is for us to build something together. And that building something is going to involve working with other people, as it almost always does. Building this synagogue, building this community, building this country into what we need it to be is something that we need to do, and it's something that we can only do while working with other people. And the Parsha this morning lays this out very clearly. We talk about building the Mishkan, and the Mishkan is the place where God will live on earth. The Mishkan is the place that will bring people together. The Mishkan is the creative expression of the religious ideals of our people. It is a hope. It is something that we build towards the future to say that we can and will fashion something that will make the world a better place. And the building of the Mishkan itself is not without a little bit of tension and fraughtness. Now, Rashi, one of our great commentaries, points out in a few chapters ago that when the Mishkan is beginning to be constructed, it says on the next day, U'macharat Yom, they start to build. But it's not clear what the next day is. So Rashi in that moment says it was the day after Yom Kippur that they started to build the Mishkan. And then in our Parsha, when it says, Vayakhel Moshe, Moses gathers everyone together, or and you spoke beautifully about this line, Rashi gives kind of a weird comment where it says when Moses gathered all the people together, he goes, don't forget it was the day after Yom Kippur. Shabbat Shalom. That's what he says. And a later rabbi, Ephraim of Lunchitz, the Kliyakar, picks up on the kind of weirdness of Rashi reminding us that the Mishkan is built the day after Yom Kippur. And he says, because the Mishkan could only be built the day after Yom Kippur. And he gives two reasons why the Mishkan can only be built the day after Yom Kippur. One of them is because, as Oren spoke about beautifully, building the Mishkan involves everybody bringing what? Stuff. Right, gold and silk and cubits and whatever it is that they're bringing. Everybody has to bring things together, but chas v'shalom, God forbid, you bring something that doesn't belong to you, because then we might be building the Mishkan with stolen property, and that wouldn't be good. And so you might forget when you bring your green silk to the Mishkan that that's actually your neighbor's green silk that you borrowed 3 weeks ago for a project for your garage, and you never gave it back to them, and now you're giving the wrong green silk, and that would be a huge problem, obviously. So what does Moshe do on the day before Yom Kippur? Moses sits in judgment, according to the Midrash, from day until night, adjudicating every single property dispute among the people so that they go into Yom Kippur with a clean slate, which means that the day after Yom Kippur, everyone is bringing only their stuff, and we're not worried that they're bringing other things. That's reason one. Reason two, Kliyakar points out, is that building something like the Mishkan, as important as expensive, as needed as it is going to make people fight. And Kliyakar, just as I know sometimes there's some history of the commentaries, unlike Rashi, who's a winemaker and a scholar just hanging out saying what he thinks about the Torah, Kliyakar is a pulpit rabbi. So maybe that's why he's reading it this way. He says, building something like the Mishkan necessarily will involve people fighting. Because I'm going to think one thing, you're going to think another thing. We're trying to build something together. And even though the Torah is remarkably specific about how everything's supposed to fit, there's going to be fights. It's going to bring up other things. You're going to get mad at your neighbor, etc., etc. So he says it can only be built at the day after Yom Kippur, because the day after Yom Kippur, everyone is feeling the most forgiving that they are all year long, and everyone is feeling the most humble that they are all year long. Because they've spent the day apologizing for all of their sins and feeling forgiveness and forgiving others. And you can only build something, says Kliyakar. We can only live ba'aguda achat, he says, in one people, in one place, in one dwelling, if we are in that post-Yom Kippur state of mind. If we are willing to be forgiving and if we are willing to be humble. And so now we go back to today. And we think about the things that we need to build in our community, the responses, the systems, the economies, the everything that we need to build. We have to go into it feeling like it's the day after Yom Kippur. It's only going to work if we go in knowing that I make mistakes all the time, and I'm wrong all the time, and I might be wrong right now. As sure as I feel about myself, I'm probably wrong. And it's okay if you are too. And it's okay, we can forgive each other. That's the only way that we can build anything in this world together. And there are a few examples of that I want to highlight from the last week, the last year. I'm on a Facebook group of a bunch of conservative rabbis, and JTS earlier this week brought in a speaker to speak to just the rabbinical school. They brought in Peter Beiner to speak. And people on this Facebook group were quite upset with the fact that he was brought in to speak because of who he is and what he has said in the past. And one of the sort of leaders of the group said, I'm going to call the deans. Like, we're all really mad. I want them to know how I feel. I'm calling the deans. And then a couple hours later, posted, I spoke with the deans. I even wrote this down. I found them to be very receptive. I listened carefully to their perspectives as well. We discussed boundaries of speakers, the goals of rabbinical school education, the challenging tensions of navigating questions about Israel today. While we may agree or disagree with their decisions, I appreciate that these are leaders who value hearing from stakeholders and show a genuine desire to engage with rabbis in the field on issues that concern us about JTS and the conservative movement. And I thought this was an amazing example of what we're talking about here. Because Kliyakar, again, I wanted to point this out. There's two different things. One is you got to have the receipts. You got to know what's what. You got to know whose property is whose. There are facts, there is justice, there is judgment that we have to know. And we also have to be humble and forgiving. And in this moment where we were upset, I think rightly so, about something that was happening at the seminary, and it engendered not yelling, not boycotts, not anger, not leaving the movement, but a conversation among leaders, a conversation about what we want rabbinic education to be, what we want the future to be, and a conversation where everyone is open and involved and humble and moving forward. And there's another example of that is a little older, but I think for many of us, before October 7th, the political fighting in Israel was something that we were getting involved in as well. And I know I'm super good at hiding my political leanings, but I felt that, and I think many people did. And after October 7th, none of it mattered. We all stood together. And that is an important moment also of understanding the other, of feeling humble towards one another, of forgiving towards one another, of knowing what our true values are and when they override our other distinctions and our other differences. And I had a moment, again almost a year ago, talking to high school kids here. And I had gone into a conversation about anti-Semitism in high school, thinking, as I had heard from some, that it's not as big a deal as some people make it out to be. I'm going to be honest. That was a thought that I had going into this conversation. And so I asked the kids, a lot of people think this is a really big deal. What do you think? And they said to me, forgive me if I told this story already. And they said to me, anti-Semitism, it's really not a problem in our school, Rabbi. It's just not. And I was thinking I guess that what someone else told me is right. It's not a big deal. So I said, okay, so what is there? And they said, well, it's not a big deal. There's this one teacher who says this all the time. And then there's these two students who post this all the time. And it's not a big deal. I mean, this one thing happened at this school, and then this other thing happened at that school. And they kept going on and on and on, listing incidents. And I said to them, guys, I'm going to stop you. That sounds like kind of a big deal. This is more anti-Semitic instances than I knew my entire childhood, and you're talking about it like it's a Tuesday. I appreciate that we as a community have done a nice job in many ways of shielding our students so that they don't feel scared, so that they go to school, so that they can learn, so that they do what they need to do. But I came around that it's actually kind of a big deal. And it's something that we are working on as a community, we're working on as a larger community, working as this community. Don't worry, we're on it. But these are all instances of trying to build something together in that post-Yom Kippur state of mind, where I'm acknowledging that I might be wrong, and I'm forgiving you if you say something that you might be wrong. And that's the only way that we can come together and that we can build something. And there's two pieces of Torah I want to highlight in this. One is that the Al-Sheikh, Moshe Al-Sheikh, points out at the end of this parsha that everyone has to bring a half shekel. And that's their way of counting the people. And he says, so why is it a half shekel, right? The fundraisers among us know that, why a full shekel? Come on. I mean, you could raise twice as much money for the Mishkan if you, they can afford to bring a whole shekel. Why a half shekel? Moshe Al-Sheikh says it's to remind everyone as they go up to the Mishkan with their half of a shekel, that they are only a part of the community. And no one person is a whole unit. All of us need each other. All of us have to build something together with each other because we're only part of a larger whole. And Rabbi Schwartzman taught me a great midrash yesterday that when they completed the Mishkan, there was, we're told, no room for Moses. It was not a place that God's presence was there. Moshe couldn't come into the Mishkan, and it wasn't until later when he is called by name, Vayikra Moshe, that he is able to make his way into the Mishkan, that there is sort of room made for him in that moment. And in this is also a lesson of how we build something together. Because if we don't see people as people, then of course there's no room for them in our community. But if we call someone by name, if we know who they are, if we know what they feel, what they believe, what they want, what their hopes and their dreams are, we can make room for people. And we can build something together with others. So when this reporter called me and said, do you want to make a comment about this? I said, I would really prefer, I'm happy to talk to you about this, but I would prefer to remain anonymous right now. And he said, that's okay, every single rabbi that I've called has asked to be anonymous. and I understand why that is. By the way, you can read the JTA piece and see if you can guess what my quote is, okay? I understand why I wanted to be anonymous in this and what my fears are. I understand what the other rabbis' fears are about that. And I think it was the right choice. You can tell me again at Kiddush if it wasn't. But also, building something beautiful together, building something lasting together, building something holy together will require speaking up. It will require speaking up from a place of forgiveness and humility, but speaking up for what we believe in and what we want to build. Shabbat Shalom.